Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen. Welcome to this week's edition of SecondsOut ReFLEXions. We're here every Monday at 4:30 p.m. to look back on the boxing events of the weekend just gone. And obviously the huge story that broke out over the weekend was the shock defeat suffered by Dillian Whyte against Alexander Povetkin. Now, if you're a regular watcher of my content, you'll know that I didn't watch the show. I didn't feel that it was worthy of pay-per-view at the full price point, and even though a huge upset took place on the card, I still stand by that. I don't think on paper it was worthy compared to some of the events we've seen for the same price in the past. But moving on from that, I have of course read what's happened. I've seen the knockout because that was on social media, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about where the relevant parties go from here, so the winner, the loser and the division as a whole. So we'll start of course with Dillian Whyte, who by most accounts was getting better of things in the first 3 rounds, and then had a great fourth, dropped Povetkin twice, looked on his way to victory, although the rumours of Povetkin's corner talking about pulling him out seemed to be just that, rumours. And then going into the 5th round, was caught by one of the best and most clinical punches that Povetkin has ever thrown. Even at 40 years of age and a veteran in his career now, he showed that he's still got that expertise. Dipped to his left, Whyte moved to block a potential body shot, hook coming around the side, and instead Povetkin pivoted and threw through the middle with a huge uppercut that knocked Whyte down and out. That was all she wrote. So a great turnaround for Povetkin, and we'll talk about him in a minute. But for Whyte, straight away after the fight, post-fight interview that Eddie Hearn was doing, he talks about wanting an immediate rematch. There is a rematch clause apparently in the contract. But it is a bit of a problem in terms of the WBC status that he held. Obviously, Povetkin now inherits the WBC interim title and becomes the WBC mandatory challenger for whoever holds the belt at the moment. It's Tyson Fury. But the flip side of that is that, if Whyte wins the immediate rematch, he'll get that status back again, but it probably won't be forced, the holder of the title won't be forced to defend against him straight after their next fight, as was the case if he'd have got past Povetkin. So it's kind of a defeat that's hurt him in more ways than one, both inside and outside the ring, unfortunately. But he is keen for the rematch. He said he spoke to Sky Sports and said he doesn't feel he needs to change too much because he believes he was winning the fight, which seems to be the general consensus. And also that he just got caught with a shot, and that he'll know in future that Povetkin disguises that shot by, shaping up for a hook to the body or the head or whatever. A lot of people are going to now look at the change of trainer that Whyte enforced in the build-up to the fight. Obviously, some reason that he and Mark Tibbs decided to no longer work together despite a long and fruitful relationship. And Xavier Miller took over head trainer duties, someone Whyte's worked with for a long time. And then Dave Caldwell was drafted in for Fight Night as a second pair of eyes as well. I don't think you can attach any blame for what happened to them. It was just a great shot by Povetkin, very good ring intelligence from a crafty veteran. But it may cause Whyte to think again about his training setup, even though you don't attach blame to those guys, maybe he would feel more comfortable going into a rematch with someone who's knocked him out and with someone he knows, who he has known and trusted for longer in the corner. I don't know. It'd be hard at this stage to see any sort of rapprochement between him and Mark Tibbs, but you never know. Stranger things have happened. Seems like the rematch could go on in November, or if not, then December. And Whyte will be chomping at the bit. He came in really good physical shape, was doing well early on, obviously scored those 2 knockdowns, so he'll be looking to get back on the horse as quickly as possible and resume his previously upward trajectory. But there's no underestimating the fact it's a crushing defeat. And I think when you wait for as long as he has for a world title shot, and it's partly because of the WBC, making him wait as the #1 contender for so long. He's only been mandatory, of course, since last July. But also, he has to take some of the blame himself, I think, for turning down some of the opportunities that have been there. The final eliminator with Kubrat Pulev would have been going to Bulgaria, of course. And other offers from the WBC in the past. And also, of course, that big shot at Anthony Joshua's unified belts back, a year and a half ago now, maybe more. Which he turned down because he didn't feel the money was fair. And he might well be right. I think there was rematch clause issues as well. It might not have just been the money. But there were issues, and he may well have been right. But if you put all those things together, and the actions of outside parties as well, it means that he was left fighting some dangerous opponents because he'd established himself as a pay-per-view fighter, which meant he couldn't just fight knockovers. So he had to fight established, good, top 10 kind of level heavyweight fighters, and it's always going to be risky, especially at heavyweight, where one punch is all it takes a lot of the time. No one not no one, but I certainly didn't expect him to lose to Povetkin, but it's always a risk when you're fighting world-class heavyweights, and Dillian Whyte now may rue the fact that he didn't get a world title shot, either through his own decisions or those of the WBC and others earlier on. So the wider context is that it's a bit of a disaster, but luckily, you know, smart Eddie Hearn, Matchroom, they have a rematch clause in the contract, and Whyte will get a chance probably before the end of the year to put things right. As for Povetkin, great news for him, evergreen. Most of us now have seen the video on social media of when he arrived back in Russia and got greeted with all the pomp and circumstance he deserved, and met that with typical cheery nature. No, he didn't smile once, I don't think, in the video, but I'm sure he was honoured by it nonetheless. It was nice to see him get the victory, I suppose, in some ways. But how do you market him from here on in? Now, this is if he gets past the immediate rematch with Whyte, of course. But if he does, what then? He's already lost by stoppage to Anthony Joshua. That was a pretty conclusive finish, despite him having some early success. So you're not really going to steer him in that direction. However, he's inherited that WBC mandatory status. A fight between him and Tyson Fury is something that Povetkin certainly seemed to relish when we all spoke to him on the Zoom conference call in the week leading up to the fight with Whyte. So that's a sellable fight if he manages to get past Whyte a second time. Then he could challenge Fury perhaps. Or if not, maybe a final eliminator for the WBC against Deontay Wilder, because that's a fight that's been mooted twice between Povetkin and Wilder. Fallen through no fault of Wilder's. And I think it's some fight that Wilder would still relish, and the winner of that would certainly deserve a shot at Fury or Joshua. So perhaps that, but for right now, Povetkin's being celebrated as a national hero in Britain. No, I'm joking. Well, by some people, I'm not joking actually. A lot of Brits seem to relish Whyte losing, which I thought was a bit of a shame. But also definitely getting celebrated as a national hero back home in Russia, and can make at least one more big payday, which I'm sure is pretty cool for him. The division as a whole, and you've got to say that it seems certainly that Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, the big showdown we all want for all the belts, does seem to have moved a step closer. Because with Whyte losing, it removes the pressing mandatory obligations on Tyson Fury with the WBC, and it also removes a potential big money opponent for Anthony Joshua in Dillian Whyte. So now, what's stopping them getting together? Well, Anthony Joshua's still got to beat his IBF mandatory, Kubrat Pulev, when that gets rearranged, probably for December this year. So hopefully he gets through that. And then Tyson Fury definitely wants to fight this year. There's doubts about whether the Wilder third fight will happen. He might fight someone else. And he is obligated to fight Wilder. But if Wilder chooses not to take up that rematch immediately, then maybe that gives Fury a bit more latitude to pick going forward. So he can have a tune-up at the end of the year when Joshua fights Pulev. And then they could come together for a huge showdown in spring 2021, which was always the plan, to have those two fights that they've kind of verbally agreed to happen early next year and then summer to autumn next year. It looks a bit closer now. A couple of obstacles have been removed, unfortunately for Dillian Whyte, but perhaps fortunately for the division as a whole. Now, I'd like to know what you guys think, especially because you've probably seen the fight and I haven't. Was Whyte in control before that shot landed? Is there anything he could have done differently to avoid defeat? Or was it just an inevitable consequence of continually fighting world-class heavyweights with no titles on the line? And what would you like to see happen next for Whyte, for Povetkin, and for AJ and Fury? Let us know. I'll respond to some of the comments below, and I will see you all next week for ReFLEXions, same time. And FlexPectations will be this Thursday, where we look ahead to the Frank Warren show featuring Daniel Dubois. Thursday, 4:30 PM for that. And just before I go, I should also say congratulations to the new British light heavyweight champion, Shakan Pitters, who took a clear, wide, unanimous decision over Chad Sugden on Channel 5 on Saturday night. And to Joe Smith Jr., another recent interviewee of mine, who knocked Elida Alvarez out of the ring, as he did to Bernard Hopkins, of course, and is now one of the mandatory contenders for the vacant WBO title. Congratulations to those two guys. And I will see you all next time. Cheers.